Hello everyone, I'm here today to do my favorite books of 2021. The baby's sleeping next to me, so we'll see how long she does that. But yeah, for now I think she's gonna let me do this. So I have 10 books in total, 5 fiction and 5 non-fiction. I didn't plan it like this, it just happened, so let's get into it. The first fiction book that it's in my favorites list is Minor Detail by Adriana Sibley. And this was part of the International Booker long list, and it's a very short book about the Palestinian conflict, and in my opinion it's a book that should have won the International Booker, but let's not dwell on that. But yeah, I really enjoyed that book. It's divided in 2 parts. The first part is about this girl in the 60s, I believe, when the conflict started in Israel and Palestine, and she's a Palestinian girl, and yeah, she's abused by these Israeli soldiers and dies in the desert. And then the second part is about more or less modern day Palestine and Israel, and this Palestinian woman that works in Israel and yeah, has to deal with all the trauma and all the discrimination, and she's also obsessed with the death of this girl in the 60s because of a detail that in the death that she feels connected to, and so she keeps researching it and trying to understand what happened to this girl, and how the 2 women connect is very powerful, and it shows a lot of the situation in the region, which I think is very important. So yeah, as I said, I really enjoyed this. I also appreciate that it's by a Palestinian author, because last year in the Booker we had a Paragon, which was from an Irish author about the same conflict, and at that time a lot of people were complaining that we didn't get the voices of the Israeli and Palestinian, and this book does really give voice to the Palestinians in the conflict, so I really appreciated that. And if you are interested in the conflict, I would recommend that you pick this up. The next book I have is The Famished by Ben Okri. This is the first book in a trilogy actually, and it won the Booker Prize in 1991. And it's about a boy, Azaro, that lives in an unnamed African country, but the author is Nigerian, and it does look a lot like Nigeria, so let's assume it's Nigeria. And he can hear voices from the afterworld, I guess, and then there is this we see how he connects with the different people in his village through that that connection with the underworld. So we see how it affects his parents, and his dad does have a lot of political intentions, so we can see that aspect as well. It's a very political novel. Ben Okri is a very political writer, and I love that part about it. We also have this woman that owns a bar that is kind of the passage between the underworld and the real world, and yeah, it looks at how all these spirits are interconnected into the real life and how they affect real life while still having a very political take on it. And yeah, I appreciated all of those aspects. I have read the other 2 books in this trilogy as well, but this one is still my favorite, and it stands on its own. You don't need to read the other 2 if you don't want to. Sorry, the light keeps changing. It's horrible day outside, so we're gonna just deal with it. The next book in my list is by Wilderman by Richard Powers, and this was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, and I was really excited for this. I think I would have read it even if it was not in the Booker, because I really enjoyed the Overstory by Richard Powers, and this book is sort of a softer, more kind version of the same topics that the overstory explores. I have a full review of it, so I will link it somewhere, but basically it follows this boy and his father, and the mom died, and the boy has mental health issues. He's in the spectrum, and he has having issues dealing with the loss of his mother, and he's also very concerned about climate change and what's happening in the climate. And then the father is astrobiologist, so there are a lot of little things that go on. There is the climate change part of it. There is the treatment that he's undergoing, in which he kind of lives in his mom's memories, and that helps him deal with day-to-day life. Also, another thing that helps him deal with day-to-day life is imagining with his dad how life would be in other planets based on the biology that he knows. And there are all these little things that I really loved, and I really connected with the main characters. I know that not everyone did, and the people that didn't hated this book because it felt very soapy and very emotionally manipulative, but to me it did work because I could identify with these people that the book was describing. And yeah, for me that was the main thing. And yeah, so I really enjoyed this one. I would have liked it to win the Booker again, but it unfortunately didn't. But yeah, at least it made it to the shortlist and a lot of people read it, so I'm happy with that. And again, you can check my review for that one. The next book is another international Booker, this time shortlisted, and that's The Employees by Olga Raven. This one is a very interesting book. It's kind of sci-fi, and it's divided in these statements that are like 1 or 2 pages long, and it is set in this spaceship in which about half of the people are humans and half of the people are robots, and each statement is from a different person in the ship, and you don't really know which ones are humans and which ones are robots. Like, it's not told, and sometimes you can gather it from the story itself, but sometimes you don't. So it really questions what makes us human, and yeah, and what is it that we recognize as human, because sometimes you do think that someone is human and then at the end there's some reveal that turns out that they're robots, and the other way around. So yeah, in that sense it really questions what humanity is. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one. It's very philosophical, and yeah, it's kind of science fiction, but it's not really about the science fiction aspect of it, I think. And it's also very, very short and very fast to read. It's 130 pages, but because it's like in statements and the format of the book itself is very small, I think I read this in an hour or two. So yeah, I really recommend this one. It's really interesting. And then the last fiction that I have to recommend is My Year of Myths by Ruth Oseki. This year has been my year of obsessing about Ruth Oseki because of this book. I had read A Tale from the Time Being before and I liked it, but the ending let me down so much that I was not sure if I was going to like her other books. But she was always on the back of my mind, so I finally picked this up this year, and I really, really liked it. So this is about a woman in the US that is Japanese American, and she is working in a TV show that is gathered for Japanese, so it's shown in Japanese TV. And in this show they show like the typical American family and the American dream, and it always implies meat and the woman of that family cooking some meat, because one of the sponsors of the show is a meat producer, and we follow that woman, and we also follow the wife of the Japanese producer of the show. And it just goes into what the meat industry does without going into the gore animal abuse so much. So it just shows how the animal industry manipulates people to buy that meat, and to show that it's necessary for our bodies and stuff, which is where it's not, and how how it's so much ingrained in our brain that that's part of the dream when it doesn't have to be. And it questions all our relationships with meat, and I really, really loved it. I think this is my favorite Rusoseki so far that I've read, and I only have one left to read, I think. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one, and I really, really recommend, especially if you have thoughts about the meat consumption and the meat industry. This is a very good place to look at it without having to read horror stories about animal misabuse and stuff like that. So yeah. So those are my 5 fiction that I would recommend from this year. And then to the non-fiction, the first one is probably, I would say, my favorite book of this year, and that's Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall-Kimerer. Robin Wall-Kimerer is a biologist and is also a Native American woman, and in this book she really shows the appreciation of nature from both perspectives, and how both can interact with each other, and they can enrich each other rather than being opposing sides of the same thing. So we often think about the biological side of nature as very scientific, very fact-based and all of that, and then the more Native American is about the soul of things and the soul of plants and animals and rocks and everything. And it kind of looks at first very distant from each other, but Robin Wall-Kimerer really is able to connect the two in a way that makes complete sense, and that is just, it's a voice to honor nature and what it gives us, and a way to say thank you to nature for what it's giving us and for what it's doing in general. And it's a book that completely changed my mind from so many things, and it really has changed the way I look at the world, and it's so impactful and so beautiful. I really, really recommend this one. It's, as I said, it's probably my favorite book of the year. The next one I have is a memoir, and that's Dear Senthuran by Akweke Emezi. This is a memoir of Akweke Emezi's life, and it connects a lot with their first novel, Freshwater, because in Freshwater they describe how this woman had like spirits inside, and had like what in Western world we might have called bipolar disorder or something like that. And I think a lot of people did take that as a metaphor for bipolar disorder. And in this book, Akweke Emezi goes deep into how they look at that, and for them it's not about it's not a metaphor, it's an actual thing. In Nigeria there are many people that are considered spirits trapped in human bodies, and that is an actual real belief, and that's what they are describing in Freshwater, and that's what they look at in their Senthuran as well. And they explain that it's not a metaphor, they actually feel like there are spirits inside them, non-gender spirits, and they go through the process that they went to become their body to become more like that spirit. So they went through a series of operations that many trans people and many non-binary people go through, and how they are affected by it and how society looks at them. And they also talk about the creative process of writing books, and they debunk this myth that authors write because they have this, I don't know, creative spirit. And they also say, like, I wrote these books because I knew I was going to get money and I knew I was going to be good at it, which, I mean, for me, I don't feel like personally I connected to them like in a I want to be friends with them kind of way. I think they are a rather unlikable person, but I also think that they are really smart and they explain things really well. And as they say, they are good writers, and they can express things from a cultural point of view that and challenge views that I had and many people have. So I really appreciated the book for that, not necessarily because I would like the person themselves, but because it's challenged many of the views that I had. The next one I have is one that I read for Peru for Invisible Cities, and that's Nueva Lunas by Gabriela Weiner, or 9 Moons. And this one is not really that connected to Peru. It's more about, it's again a memoir. It's about her pregnancy, and maybe this had that much impact for me because I was pregnant when I read it. But yeah, it's written in 9 chapters, and each chapter goes through a month of the pregnancy. That's why it's called 9 Moons, because it's the 9 months of a pregnancy. And it goes through all of the raw feelings that a person feels when they're pregnant. So like the angst that everything is gonna be okay, all the pains, all the hopes, all the little misunderstandings, and I really felt like she was really honest and really true to how actually pregnancy is. And it's not like pregnancy is horrible or pregnancy is all glow and butterflies. It's more of a, it's both things at the same time, and that's okay kind of thing. And she also talks about the thoughts that were coming back, the memories that were coming back each month. And she had a history of sexual abuse, and she also immigrated from Peru to Spain, and that was also a fairly traumatic process, as all immigration stories are. So it has all of those elements dispersed within the pregnancy, because yeah, the pregnancy does make you think about your life in a different way, and I really appreciated the honesty and the rawness of that conversation. The next book I also read for Invisible Cities, but this time it was for Egypt, and that was The Hidden Face of Eve by Nawal El-Sawadi. And Nawal El-Sawadi is a very well-known feminist Egyptian writer, and this book explores her views on the feminism in the Muslim world. And she's also a doctor. I think she's like a gynecologist or something like that. So she saw a lot of the consequences of female genital mutilation, and she talks a lot about that as well. And yeah, this book does show the contradictions of the Muslim world when it comes to women, but it also shows a very different kind of feminism based on the Muslim tradition. So it's not just taking the Western ideas and putting them in the Muslim world, it does come within the Muslim world. And one of the arguments that she gives that stuck with me was the fact that we often see that in the Muslim world women are powerless because they have all these rules they have to follow, but in a sense she actually sees that as a recognition of the power of women, because if they didn't have power by themselves, they shouldn't need to be controlled. So yeah, that's a bit of the tone of the book, and she challenges a lot of the Muslim conceptions of women, but it also challenges a lot of the conception of the Western world when it comes to Islam. And yeah, as I said, I really enjoyed that change in perspective, and it gave me a way of looking at things that I had never think about before. And it recognizes as well the fact that feminism is not a Western exclusive idea, and that other cultures have come up with their own ideas of the roles of women and the power of women. And then the last one I read for the BookTube Prize, and that's Inferno by Catherine Cho. And this is another memoir about the author's experience with postpartum psychosis. So she was hospitalized for it, and it's told in a way in which she starts when she was in the hospital ward, and then it goes back and forth, explaining how that happened and why that happened. And it's sort of like her in the ward, remembering the things that happened, and also the complete lack of consciousness of what is happening at times, and all the feelings that go with it. And the author is Korean American, and she lived in the UK, and she explains a lot about her background and how that affected the whole process as well, and the not being close to family when you have a small child, and then visiting the family, and all of the expectations that the family has on how you are supposed to take care of your child, and all the pressures that you get from that. And it's very self-aware, it's very honest, and it is very thoughtful in the way that she presents how all of these things are interconnected, and how how it happens. And it's also very kind to herself, because well, I really appreciated this book when I first read it, but now that I have had a baby, and I am also been diagnosed with mental health issues related to postpartum, I can even more appreciate the courage and the honesty that she put into the book, because it's really difficult to talk about these things when the whole world, and yourself too, it's not just an external thing. When you plan to have a baby, you expect to be happy. I think it's very powerful, and I think it's very important that people read it, so that these issues are more understood, and we have a better awareness of all of the complications that come with having a baby afterwards as well. So yeah, those are my 10 favorite books of 2021. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know what your favorite books of 2021 have been, and let me know what you're looking forward for the next year. And until next video, bye.